Welcome to Now Playing Podcast review of Detention, part of Now Playing's video game movie review series. Hosted by Arnie, Justin, and Stuart. This episode will contain detailed plot spoilers and strong language. Listener discretion is advised.
Today we're discussing Detention, starring Gingle Wang, Fu Mengpo, Seng Ching Hua, Cecilia Choi, directed by John Su. This is the Now Playing co-host who spends all of his time in detention, Arnie.
And Stuart.
And this is Justin.
And you can call it detention if you want, but school is out on the video game retrospective. With this podcast, gentlemen, there is nothing left to cover. At least in this moment, there are no other video game movies we have not covered. I mean, I think there's a few, but like they were made for foreign markets and never had an American equivalent, so they don't count.
And neither do direct-to-video animated films.
Right, yes. We have to have standards somewhere, and God knows we set the bar real low.
So yeah, this is going to be like Flynn's Arcade, right? We're not coming back until it's dusty and 20 years later from now.
There are video game movies being made. We'll talk about it. It won't be that long. But I don't know. Like, the other thing was, like, all right, we started with Donkey Kong, King of Kong. What the hell is Detention? I have never heard of this game.
I haven't either, but it was a game that was made back in 2017 specifically for download. It was for Steam, that game store that runs on PC and Mac, and I hadn't heard of Detention, but I went out to Steam and picked it up. It was only a few bucks and played it. It is a real throwback. It is a adventure game like King's Quest or one of those real old ones where you walk into a room and you pick up a key and you pick up a note and have to decipher the note to figure out the puzzle, and you walk room to room. It really felt like somebody's hobby. It didn't feel like a professional game. Even the graphics kind of looked like cutout paper dolls instead of 3D animation.
I'll second that. I watched a walkthrough. I didn't play it, but yeah, the animation style was throwing me off. I didn't really enjoy the way the game looked. My reference, tell me if I'm close on this, was Myst, right? Like this is one of those point and click and try to figure out puzzles.
Kind of, but it really holds your hand. Now, I played this game for a few hours, and it turns out I got about halfway through it. And then I'd had my fill of this game, and I decided I'd watch an online walkthrough, and I watched the entire playthrough. And this playthrough I watched, the guy didn't quite know what he was doing, and he beat the game in 2.5 hours. So it is a short game, and it really does tell you things like when you pick up a key, it says, you found the basement key. You know, a game like Myst isn't going to tell you where that key is.
Never, no. Yeah, you will struggle for hours sticking it in anything, trying to open anything. So I think I would like shorthand, knowing that I never got through Myst. I don't even think I got that far. Maybe a little bit of that would be helpful, a little directiveness from the video designers. But yeah, 2-hour game, I don't know how much you paid for it, but I want more.
It really feels like somebody had an idea for a novel and had some game programming skills and went off and made this game, because the game was adapted into a novel as well. Just before there was a movie, there was a game, and there was a novelization of the game. It was very story-driven. It is incredible. It is pretty much the movie we are here to talk about from beginning to end. But it's so non-linear in the way it's told that I think if I wasn't watching a walkthrough and having a really compressed time of watching it, by the end of the game, if I'd played it and if it had taken me 5 hours over the span of a week, I don't know that I would have been able to piece together all of the plot that is dripped out in its fashion. But when we talk about this movie, I feel like we're talking about the game, because by playing the game, and watching the movie, I feel like I've seen the same story again and again.
It is a more complicated story than I anticipated. I'll just go ahead and say that, like, the artwork, the poster, the game itself kind of gave me J-horror vibes. It's a Taiwanese production, so it's not Japan, but I was definitely getting kind of Samara, Ghost Girl kind of stuff off of this. I just assumed it was going to be horror. And so to find out it was much more intricate and about these political situations. I mean, we should start there. It's so weird. We're in the video arcade. But how much do you know about Taiwan and China? Because I feel like this is foundational to your understanding of this movie.
Yeah, doesn't it really feel like this is chapter 1 of a deep history lesson that's still playing out to this day? It's like, let's go back here, at least for a prologue to what's going on.
Yeah, when I was growing up, Taiwan was a punchline because the market was flooded. Like, if it was a cheap plastic toy, it was stamped made in Taiwan all over that. And as I did my research for this movie to find that out, it was because the U.S. government was desperately trying to prop up Taiwan's economy. They are the rebels. As China went communist, they had this faction of, well, we thought that they were heroes because they were anti-communist, but this movie is going to tell us they were oppressive in their own way. And so, yeah, the Kuomintang government, particularly at the time they're going to focus on, was all about suppressing democracy. And it did hurt their economy, and it did require a lot of adjustments before this country became democratic in 2000. How many Taiwanese movies have you guys even seen? I feel like Ang Lee is like the go-to. He's like the biggest cultural export Taiwan has ever had, for Americans anyway. You know, he made Brokeback, Hulk, Crouching Tiger, Life of Pi. I feel like people know him, but you may not have ever seen another Taiwanese director.
I don't think I have. If I do, I don't know about it.
Yeah, it's the same boat, you know. I mean, it's just one of those things where it's like, you know, maybe I am just a ignorant American, but like, unless it hits something big, you know, I haven't actively gone out looking for Taiwanese art to inject.
Yeah, I like international cinema, so every now and then one of them wins a prize at Cannes or something like that, and I'll go find the film. There was a new wave. There was a whole series of directors that kind of burst out on the 80s, but none of them went Hollywood. None of them came and made films here in America, so I don't think that they really have any cachet. And the person that made this film that we're here to talk about, this is his first movie ever. He had done some shorts, but this is him trying out feature films for the first time. And it won a lot of awards in Taiwan anyway. They have something called the Golden Horse Awards, kind of their Oscars. And this was up for everything from picture all the way to song, and won quite a few of them. Director, script, visual effects, art direction. It made big money for Taiwan, which is to say it made $8 million, which is huge.
Yeah, and it only cost, about $3, I think I saw?
I mean, again, conversion rates, I guess. I don't know how you quantify it. But yes, a game that feels like it would probably be much more culturally impactful in Taiwan. Yes, spun off into a novel, spun off into this movie, spun off into a TV series. We'll talk about that afterwards, but we're here to talk about this movie. Arnie, why don't you give him the plot, and we'll find out if Detention is worth sitting through.
I'm going to go linear. I'm not going to try to describe things in the event they happened in the movie. So as Stuart alluded to, in the 1960s, Taiwan was in a period that is now called the White Terror. And during this time, any activity considered communist or leftist was punishable by death. Even such an act as having a prohibited book could lead to fatal consequences. This movie, set during that time, focuses on high school senior Fang. The girl has a troubled home life and an abusive father, but has developed a romantic relationship with one of her instructors, Mr. Chang. But Mr. Chang is in a secret book club with several of the students and another instructor, Miss Yin. Fang becomes jealous of Miss Yin's relationship with Mr. Chang, even though the two teachers are not romantically involved. Still, to get Miss Yin out of the picture, Fang rats out the book club to the school's headmaster, Inspector Bai. But rather than just fire Miss Yin, Bai has both Yin and Chang killed, as well as the students in the book club. Out of guilt, Fang committed suicide. So this movie basically takes place in purgatory. Fang is unable to remember her acts that led to the deaths of the book club members. She wanders around a mostly deserted version of the school, haunted both by demonic spirits and the spirits of the killed members of the book club. Wandering with Fang is fellow student and book club member Wee. Through several encounters, Fang's treacherous deeds are relived. At the end, Fang must make a choice: continue to deny her culpability and remain in this purgatory, or accept her deeds. In doing so, she helps Wee become the sole survivor of the book club. And we jump forward many years to see Wee as a middle-aged man. He's visiting the school, which is now closed. He finds one of the forbidden books and gives it to the ghost of Fang as credits roll.
Okay, first, let's just get it out of the way. Americans, trying to pronounce these names. Yeah, I saw that name Fang a million times. I had the closed captioning on, but every character pronounced it Shinza. So I don't know how you get Fang and Shinza out of the same thing. And then it's Fang and Chang and Shang, and there's a Wei Zhang. Yeah, oof. Okay. Thank God that there's not many characters.
Yeah, I was convinced at least 2 of them were named Ray. That was confusing to me for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. You said we, but I pronounced it way. So we'll probably not use proper names as much as possible and just say the male student, the female student. It is a small cast, so we will be able to hopefully make sense for those that haven't played the game, haven't read the novel, haven't watched this movie.
Yeah. And to be fair, Arnie, you did mention that, this is a venture through purgatory, but to be fair to the script, that's not obvious to us as a viewer, right? We don't know what we're wading into here.
Well, here's what I will say. Early on, I definitely was like, I get it. They're dead. 2 students are waking up after hours and wandering around an empty school, and they're seeing headstones with no name on it, and then their name appears on it. I'm like, you couldn't make it more obvious. They're dead. Are we going to have to wait all movie for them to realize, oh my God, we died? But that's not really the mystery. The mystery is, who is the rat in the book club? Which is kind of a strange mystery. I'm going to go ahead and say I wasn't expecting a video game to care so much about literacy, but yes, this is all about a book club.
It is a really strange and morose version of Dead Poets Society.
Not a bad sum up. Yeah, agreed.
My elevator pitch for this movie was going to be Dead Poet Society meets Jacob's Ladder.
That's good. I love it. I do actually love it, and I hope that makes sense for people. But yeah, they will tell us later. There's an inner title that explains things, but I think it's just important to start out here. 1962 and a purgatory are the 2 timelines that we kind of jump back and forth. And so that means Cold War. And this is the thing I couldn't wrap my head around. Again, you say China around this time, I think Cultural Revolution and communism, but Taiwan was independent. Taiwan was all the people that weren't going to go communist. So we're actually going to root for the communists in this movie. It's a strange position for me to I don't usually think of that as happening, but we are to see that people that are leftists are the heroes of this story, and it's the hard faction Kuomintang are the villains, as embodied by Mr. Bai. As we start this movie, we're going to see that the face of this oppressive regime is a guy that's waiting for you when you get to school. Girls on the left, boys on the right. Everyone walks in lockstep, and it's a really militaristic vision of education.
What's funny is that this is a historically accurate representation of the past, and yet my only way to relate to this, because I am, like Justice said, I'm an ignorant American who doesn't know about this time period in Taiwan. Everything I now know about this period, I've learned from researching this movie. But my way into this material was our 100 Years of Dystopia retrospective series that we did, because this is reminding me of Fahrenheit 451 and so many of those movies we watched with the totalitarian government where literature is banned. And yeah, you say we're rooting for the communists. They don't put that final point on it. We're rooting for free thinkers is how they're going to say it.
Yes. The kids, right? It's the kids versus the strict military guy. If you just think in terms of totalitarian imagery, then it's very easy to go along with, of course, we want the young people to feel free.
And I think it's probably helpful to strip any of those labels that, we commonly put on these type of things away, because it's not important ultimately to the story. It's not at its heart a story about communism or totalitarianism. It's a story about freedom and, like Arnie said, free thinking. Mm-hmm. So, yes, historically, it's probably important to know that, it was anti-communism for our story's sake.
I'm assuming everyone in Taiwan wouldn't need this explanation. They know very well. It's worth putting out, the Kuomintang is still a party that tries to go for elected office. To this day, they still exist. They've been around for 100 years and have survived World War I, World War II, and the communist insurgency, plus the democracy insurgency, and it still exists. It's this very right-wing, militaristic idea of China that just continues on. And so I imagine putting out this game in Taiwan even in 2016, 16 years after the party finally fell to democracy, was kind of risky. I mean, I imagine you'd be worried because, again, people have been killed. Many people have been killed for speaking out against this regime.
Yes. I guess my bigger point is that this isn't a political movie, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like possibly it could be perceived with some of the words we use that it's being used as propaganda for one side or another. At its heart, it is about freedom of the spirit.
I think you can take an apolitical reading, and I imagine many people that aren't up on the politics will have no choice but to do so. It will feel like a love triangle, and that's kind of where it lands. But again, I'm hyper aware that, again, like even the makers of this game had to be a little worried that they might, wake up dead. I mean, like, this is, to speak out in this way was an act of bravery, and it's the most politically charged video game I've ever heard of or seen.
That include Castle Wolfenstein?
Yeah, I guess those Uwe Boll ones as well. There was some, yeah. Anyway, but yes. So what we get here at the beginning, again, children marching. There's some voice on an intercom that's saying everyone is responsible for reporting espionage and death to anyone that is trying to be a rebel and free thinker. And you can see these kids are nervous that when Mr. Bai pulls this little kid, Shang, I mean, he's not doing a good job lying. He's got his hat pulled over his eyes, like, don't look at me. I'm like, you're a target, dude. He's going to pull you over right there if you got your eyes covered. And here's what I couldn't tell. His friend Wei jumps in there. Did he pull the doll out? Was that like a trick of the hand? That he's like, oh, my friend just had a doll that he didn't want you to see. Not that he's holding a banned book in that bag.
I think that Shang always had the dolls. We'll see him playing with puppets later on in the book club, and they're going to complain that he's too into his dolls and not enough into the books to be in the book club.
That's true.
I also had the same question, was we just carrying a doll and did some kind of like sleight of hand and it's like, see, I have a doll.
I thought he was a magician. Yeah. I watched it 3 times and I'm like, that's some David Copperfield shit. Like, I couldn't tell. But I think you make a lot of sense, Arnie. This kid is going to be considered a prime suspect for being the rat because he never took the whole learning the books, transcribing the books, copying the books thing seriously. He's always playing with dolls, and some people are going to be like, why'd you let him in this club? He could get us killed. And I think playing even with those dolls, if in fact those are like ancient Chinese dolls, like that, I don't know, politically, however connected they are, that could also get you in trouble. But Mr. Bai lets that pass, and the kids can go on throughout their day, salute the flag, and we'll see that they all gather, seems like after school, to the back room, the storeroom, where they, again, transcribe things that are not communist manifestos per se. They're just things that have, I think the piece that they cite is it's an Indian poet who was speaking out against British colonialism. And so they identify with that because they're standing up to their government in the same way.
And again, I was thinking about the end of Fahrenheit 451, the people who memorized the books. Here they are transcribing the books in case they never see the books again. So they're recreating the illustrations and copying the text from the books. I'm like, all you're doing is leaving a bigger trail of evidence for yourself. The more copies of these books you have, the more likely you are to get caught.
Yes. And yeah, it's hard to know what the long-term plan was, but obviously, at least in Fahrenheit, they were going to learn it all by heart, which seems daunting. But yeah, here they're just making handwritten copies that, if there's somebody going through bags every time you pass into the school, this is... Well, we don't have to long to guess because they jump ahead in time and we see that Wei is suddenly hanging upside down. They pulled out his fingernails. They're waterboarding him. And we know that there was a rat. Somebody has turned in a book to Mr. Bai. And the mystery of this movie is not that these people aren't politically executed and are now ghosts. I think that's an assumption that you were to make almost instantly. It's who betrayed them and why.
And Justin, I'm looking to you. Stuart, I know you did some pre-research on the game too. I don't know if you saw the movie first or researched the game first, but I came in having played the game, watched the game. Frame 1, I know Fang is the one who betrayed them. So if the thrust of this movie is a whodunit, It's ruined for me from the very beginning. And so, Justin, were you onto that mystery? Because again, I think this movie is almost as confusingly told as the game. And B, did you suspect Fang was the rat?
Yeah, so my experience with this is I watched the movie first and then I researched the game afterwards. So yeah, nothing was spoiled from the game coming into it. But yeah, I mean, I think just narratively and the way they're laying this out in front of us, it's obvious. I don't even think it's supposed to play as a mystery. Unless, I don't know, I felt like maybe that was something that might have been heavier in the game, but going back and watching that didn't seem to be the case either. So, and Stuart, you said it's obvious that these people are dead and stuff like that. I really thought that we were maybe experiencing in and out of nightmares, for a while here.
Yeah, because that's actually the title. This thing is broken into 3 chapters, and part 1 is called Nightmare. So you're right. I mean, that's a good assumption. I think that is how it's supposed to play. We woke up in school after hours, and it's got a creepy Nightmare on Elm Street vibe. There are demons walking around with lanterns and everything.
Right. Maybe a little bit of predictive dreaming or something like that. But no, I mean, like early on, like when we take this turn into like we're no longer at school during the day and we are in this other realm, we're following the same character. First thing she bumps into is a version of herself without a face, right? So it's almost like the duality of it there was pretty obvious.
And when they do wake up in this school, they're going to pay some heavy homages to the game. During the beginning of the game, you play as Fang, and she's walking around with a red candle to illuminate her way. And here at the beginning, she's walking with a red candle. And they're even going to do a shot where she's just moving from the left of the screen to the right of the screen with this boarded up school building behind her, straight out of the game. It just felt like almost the game footage being reenacted here. They're definitely, not just in story, but in look, making nods to how that game worked.
And yet, I will say this, if I hadn't had that pre-knowledge, if I hadn't seen that credit in the titles, comes from Red Candle Games, I would never guess that this had ever been developed as a video game, because I can't imagine how you'd play it. There aren't enough creatures to fight for it to feel like a Resident Evil.
Yeah, that's the thing, is when I played the game, you and I had been talking and you told me this movie was J-horror, and I was expecting like a Silent Hill game or a Resident Evil game.
Yeah, me too.
And so when I sat down to play the game, I was like, all right, I'm having a shit day anyway. Let me play a game to take my mind. What the fuck is this game?
I want to mow down some creatures. What are we doing here?
It seemed to me, from all the walkthrough that I watched, and it was only about half an hour of a 2-hour walkthrough, but like there's the lantern monster, and then sometimes your silhouette, your shadow is doing things that you aren't doing. I couldn't see any other creature.
There are like 3 different creatures, and there's what's called the Lingered, which is just an evil spirit, and you have to hold your breath when you're around them. And so you right click.
What?
And your character like covers their mouth and walks. And then if you hold your breath too long, it like starts to get blurry and you pass out. And so you have to really hurry past them. Then there are some that you have to leave food offerings for, and they'll go for the food and leave you alone. And then there's the lantern demons, where you have to not only hold your breath, but stand still.
And, they paid a little bit of homage to that in this movie. They get stuck in a closet type of thing, and they're both, holding their mouths so they aren't heard breathing.
That explains that, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, that's a little bit helpful. Although I gotta say, is it stinky? Like, it just was a weird thing to do.
It did seem like the lantern monster was smelling you in the game. It felt very much like it was going off sound and smell.
Okay. So, yes, 2 students, Wei and Fang, and they're acting like they don't know each other very well. We'll find out, in fact, that Wei, we know even from the early scenes that we've already seen in the prologue, has a crush on her, that he keeps looking at her, but she is not a part of this book club. And so it'll be a long tease to see that basically he's friend-zoned. This is somebody that he wishes he had gotten with, but who, in fact, never really showed him time of day.
Sometimes it's cultural and sometimes it's just, the movie maker. But I didn't get a sense that the school was so big that everybody there didn't just automatically know each other. I didn't know that there could be strangers amongst this community of people. You know what I'm saying? Like, because we saw her early on that first day walking in, and yeah, like when they introduce themselves to each other, it's kind of like, come on, it looks like there's 12 people in this class. How would you not know who that is?
Yeah, and she's like a model student. We'll hear later lip service that her papers were always posted on the billboards and blackboards and what have you. So she would be, everyone would know, it's teacher's pet, essentially, is what she is. And maybe, again, that signals that, oh, well, of course she's the rat. Of course she's going to be the one to do it, except she doesn't rat to teachers. She's actually going to rat to... What is Mr. Bai? You called him the principal or something, but I don't think he is connected to the school. I think he kind of hijacks the school and puts it under his control. But it feels like the teachers are very much against everything that he's about.
Later on, Fang's father is going to say, contact the inspector at the school. The fact that everybody seems to answer to him, I went with headmaster, but yeah, it could just be a government agent instilled in the school to enforce proper thinking.
Yeah, they could just kind of ride in on like Jeeps one day. And my sense is that really they're unwelcome, uninvited, there to basically find insurgents and yes, people that are a threat to national identity. But Arnie, are you with me? I mean, maybe you had already played the game before you watched the movie, so...
Yeah, so I was just making comparisons, and yeah, what they do here that they don't in the game is they're going to bring in a lot of the characters of the book club. In the game, most of the people in the book club aren't even given names. It's we and the other students are punished, you know? So here, they're going to make characters out of, you know, the half dozen students in the book club, and we're going to start running into them and seeing their stories and their fates as they wander through the school.
In fact, we meet Mr. Zhang before we meet Wei, that Feng's wandering around, and it's kind of an early identifying characteristic of her, that she's really obsessed with this art teacher. She's trying to catch up with him. He shuts the door on her, and the phone will ring, and she hears his voice with a crackling and thinks, oh, he's somewhere here in the building. She's obsessed with finding this teacher. We will find out that they, in fact, have a illicit romance, and I think that was telegraphed to me long before they even by the time that they find that note where it sounds like a lover's request, I was like, okay, I got this detail.
Well, that's what plays out on screen, but can we say for certain that was true, or was that part of her fevered thought? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know that our main character is a reliable narrator, right? Like, anything that we see from her perspective could just be her fantasy.
Okay, I may be very colored by the game, because in the game, it was very clear that they had a romantic relationship. They went out to movies together and things and met. Here, they do have that scene where he's drawing the narcissus plant and they're hanging out together. Yes, you could go unreliable narrator, but I don't think she's fabricating entire dates with him. So I think that it was a relationship of some romantic sort. Now, how physical did it get? How many rules were broken? Was this a don't stand so close to me situation? Did he start to shake and cough like that guy in that book? I don't know.
Either way, I mean, yeah, it would be a questionable relationship in a free society. It's probably pretty troublesome in this current society.
I suspect that this is a well-known story maybe in the Asian school system. I feel like the teacher, student, schoolgirl particularly is this sort of fantasy that has been promulgating in a lot of certainly Japanese culture. And I just suspect that it's a problem, right? Or something that happens where male mentors get too close to schoolgirls of a certain age. And yes, what laws are broken by American standards are not clear, but it's pretty clear that their relationship is not only dangerous for him professionally, but yes, as she finds out, she will have a run-in with Wei, and he'll spill all the books, and she will look through his music book and see that instead of musical notes written in there, it's actually, you know, some poem or some contraband novel. Now you're really trusting, yes, a lover, an underage lover with a secret that could literally get lots of people killed.
Yeah. Ultimately, I guess it doesn't matter whether or not it was a real relationship or just something in her mind. The consequences end up being what matter.
I think she's more into it than he is, but I think that's just the nature of her having this seeking relationship, always wondering to know, where's Mr. Zhang, Mr. Zhang. They go to this teacher's lounge and see that, yeah, they've gone through his things. They really have the impression that nobody is there because the Chinese have raided the place and a whole bunch of people have been arrested. And for some reason, they're not arrested yet, but they're snooping around. A lot of the early stuff is about, well, a couple things. One, they go outside and see that typhoons have taken out the road. They can't leave. And two, they go to the janitor to get a key, and we find out that he was tortured for giving out keys to insurgents and dangerous thinkers, and they've cut out his teeth and his eyes. It's all real gross.
Yeah, the teeth is actually a reference to one of the puzzles in the game where you have to roll some dice in a bowl and the dice become teeth. It's, a little bit eerie there, but you say they tortured the guy. He's missing half his head. I mean, I'm pretty sure that's a walking corpse walking around there, that Mr. Gao. And he's trying to kill Fang and Wei because he wants to prove his loyalty. But I'm pretty sure what we're seeing here is, a mutilated corpse.
But which, again, would say to me, everyone here is dead. Like, after hours school they all feel like ghosts haunting their school. And so I really feel, particularly since we saw in the prologue that Wei is being strung up, hung upside down. Sometimes they have a knife to his throat. I just predict that, it seems almost maddeningly, angeringly obvious that I hope this movie is not about him taking 90 minutes to realize he's already dead, because that would be disappointing. The more interesting thing, and I guess, Justin, what I'm hearing you say, something you guessed, I wasn't sure on, is Fang the person that betrayed him? We know that he resents the day he ever met her. We'll see him say things like that in asides, but is that just jealousy because she went with a teacher, or is that because she inflicted the ultimate injury of turning him in and getting him killed?
Yeah, and I can't say exactly when, like, if I would have paused the movie halfway through and had that question posed to me, I wouldn't be able to say one way or other for sure. But we start seeing more and more things in her backstory as well. We learn her home life is not great. She has a apparently abusive father.
Okay, yeah, what you're referring to is part 2, the whistleblower. That at that point, it has been labeled. They wander around, I would say, for a good 40 minutes. And eventually they run into Miss Yin, who is running the secret book club, and she just calls it out. You did this! She points the finger. It's kind of a creepy scene where, like, the light, they have an overhead hanging light that's swinging around, and every time it swings into the shadows, one of the students disappears and becomes a photo on the wall. And again, you have it identified from that point on that she is the rat. She is the betrayer. Why did she do it becomes the thrust of the middle of this movie. And it starts with the fact that, she's psychologically unhinged. She lives in a house where her mom is beat by her dad.
And it's also where the movie takes a turn from what we might have just thought might have been some sort of adventure, and we're rooting for these two kids to figure out what's going on, because they'd been together up until this point. But this is where Wei turns on her as well. He takes off and decides he's had enough of helping her out for now.
Yeah, in the game, you actually start by playing as Wei, or Wei, however you want to pronounce it, and then pretty quickly you switch over to Fang, and yes, you do have to slit Wei's throat in the game in order to solve one of the puzzles. So
interesting.
That's something that they're bringing in here too, so that they two started off together very much like the game, because we found Fang in the game, and then Fang becomes the protagonist all of a sudden, and it's mirrored because at the very end of the game you play Wei, but he's a very old man. So
you bring up something really interesting that I think is key to emphasize. There is no central character. This movie is postmodern, and we see the same scene from different viewpoints, and whose story is it changes. I think we can focus on Fang now because the middle chapter is her story, and her story is the one that they seem to want to offer the most about. The first part feels maybe a little bit more about Wei, but certainly by this point, we see that she for reasons I'm not entirely sure, has doodled in her yearbook. She has vandalized all the principals and all of the important figures and put funny mustaches and weird glasses and what have you on them. And that gets her in trouble with this Mr. Bai. Again, he's looking at your books. He's looking at what you're doing. He leans on her and says, I could have your dad not get that promotion that he's expecting. And that's when Mr. Zhang comes in and saves the day. That's why I know it's real. Like the romance, they both know they're doing something that's dangerous because he takes her to his office and they just start writing to each other because there's so many people around. They cannot risk letting other people know what they're feeling for each other. And they meet after hours. There's a secret rendezvous, I think at his place or away from school where, he's going to draw for her and she's going to teach him how to play piano. That's a puzzle, right? The fact that they learn the keys and all that. I was like, that's gameplay. I know it's gotta be.
There is a puzzle where you have to hit the notes in a certain order to play a certain melody in order to unlock another door. So, yep.
Mm-hmm. And I know he's not giving every student a jade reindeer. Like he gives her this necklace and all of that. He's macking. He has gone beyond what an appropriate teacher-child relationship should be. And I think he feels bad for her in part because, again, when she goes home, that her dad gets reported, that the mom, we had empathy for her at the beginning because she was battered. We see her praying to Buddha with a bruise on her forehead, but Buddha tells her where he keeps his, I guess he's doing some kind of, what do we think? Embezzlement or something? He's doing something with numbers that's shady. She turns that in and, it doesn't take much in the society, I think, to get a bag over your head and off you go in a truck.
That's pretty cold as killing your husband, turning him into the government that will execute him. Wow, that is certainly a way to go about it.
But, you could look at it like he was killing her, right? Like, what defense did she have if it was permissible for him to batter her every day? Who's to say she wouldn't be killed as well? So it's cold, it's calculated, but I think it's what teaches the daughter to be like, I can do that too. Once I find out that Mr. Zhang is doing something behind the door, she didn't know about the book club, but she knows that he's hanging out with this Miss Yin and she disapproves of their relationship. She thinks that this is his real lover, his side girl, and so she's going to turn in that book to get her killed.
Or at least fired her out of the picture, right?
In the game, it's very clear that she thought Miss Yin would be fired, and that would be the extent of everything.
Oh, really? Okay.
And in fact, Miss Yin is not killed in the game. She actually flees Taiwan and lives as an expatriate until she dies of cancer.
What? Okay, that's a long story that I wouldn't have predicted. Okay. Again, having seen her mom do that to her dad, I predicted that was her expectation. What she didn't expect was that they would, I think she was even promised that he would be protected in this, that they would only go after the book club, and that meant Miss Yin and some of the other students. The fact that, she's going to have this fantasy sequence where she thinks she's going to meet him at a movie, and then the movie actually shows his execution, that is a surprise to her.
Yeah, because you said the mystery is who did this, but what this movie is doing is, as Justin alluded to Jacob's Ladder, Fang doesn't know she did it. What we're finding out, Fang is finding out with us. She has been living or unliving in denial of her own actions and the results that she caused.
Yeah. I think when we lay it out like this, it sounds really obvious because we're extracting the flashbacks that speak to this storyline. But it should be said, we're skipping a whole lot of stuff in the middle and that there's a lot of distraction. You could call it red herring or other potential candidates that are happening, that as they keep running into monsters and running around, we're meeting other people that could be the rat. There was this other guy in the book club named Win Shou who is now burning all the book stuff in a bonfire. And we have a moment where Wei goes out to talk to him and the monster shows up and breaks his neck and puts his head in a bag.
And I want to call out these monster effects, pretty damn good. There's not a lot of them. And so I think they were able to put their money into really detailing what they had there. Now, do they look like extras from Silent Hill? Yeah, a little bit. But they're true to the game style with the giant monster carrying that big ball lantern. And yet the faces, I have no problem with the CGI going on here. It's appropriately creepy.
I wanted more of it, I'll be honest. Or I don't know if I want more of it now that I know what the movie is. I expected a whole lot more of it. The fact that we've gone for half the movie, we saw the janitor get his neck broken. We see this guy get his neck broken. I imagined this to be a kill fest. I imagined The Grudge, right? Like we would just really relish each student's perishing under the hands of this demon. It really isn't a movie that is about relishing violence. Quite the opposite. This is a movie that is going to take the stance that violence is ugly and brutal and horrifying and not something to get your rocks off to.
Yeah, and I'm actually kind of quite surprised by that and enjoy that a little bit more. You know, I mean, the parts I'm enjoying more is when we don't know what this creature is. That suspenseful, you know, the sound design of just kind of a limping and the chain ringing and them having to be quiet. That suspense was great, you know, and after we demystify this thing, we see it in its full body. Like Arnie said, yeah, it's workable. I mean, it's a scary looking creature, but I don't want the rest of the movie to be about running away from this thing. You know, it's not that type of movie.
True. Yeah, that would be disappointing if this suddenly just became a chase movie with the crooked man, like, lifting up doors and finding them in there and, you know, they're running around. That's not what this is. There's just enough of it just to keep you, you know, not feeling like you're on solid ground, right? Like feeling like, wow, something else is going on. That Shang is locked in a closet and that the other people thought that he might have done it because it was his responsibility that day to have the book. Again, like, I think the problem is this thing is not edited in a way where you're holding all of these potential suspects in your palm. You know, I wasn't sitting there watching the movie thinking, is it him? Is it her? Is it them? By the time we get to Shang, in fact, I remember feeling like it was pretty evidently Thing and that they had kind of, why are you telling us it could be somebody else when we know very well that this girl is a jealous lover who turned in Miss Yin for, reasons to be closer with Shang?
Yeah, it becomes less about who and more about why and what.
Mm-hmm. And can she be redeemed? Because again, harsh judgments, right? I mean, I get that you really like this teacher, but to have him killed? I mean, that's callous. I mean, again, at least her mom can say, I was being battered. But all of this over a jade reindeer? Yeah. And that is a graphic image when we do have the moment where, like, they do it in dream sequence and then they do it in reality. But in the dream sequence, she literally pulls the book out of the neck that she just sliced open. It's a really graphic moment it's the most shocking, I think, violence in the film.
Yeah, that was a really good scene. And like I said, that was calling back to one of the early scenes in the game. You didn't pull a book out of his throat. You had to bleed him out, though.
Yeah, but we do also see her just give the book to Bai at some point. And again, like, I think for her, I guess her defense is she didn't think it would kill too many people. And it helps for me to know, Arnie, that you said in the game she thought Miss Yin would be fired. But they had already seen a Mr. Wang, like, get put on a truck and wheeled away and never come back. Like, does that look like firing to you, or does that look like firing squad? I think she's awfully naive to think that these people are just being terminated. Or rather, when I say terminated, being fired. That's, they're being terminated. But, like, come on, you know what time you're living in. You would know from all of the signals around you that this is a very dangerous time to be involved in the political ideas that she knows her lover is involved in.
It was very confusing when that first teacher does get dragged away, because he's not part of the book club. You don't really know who he is or what he's done. Why is he being dragged away like this? I at first thought that might be Mr. Chen that was being dragged away, but Mr. Chen is watching it happen. So I'm like, wait, who's this teacher being dragged away? And so you got to think that these people are disappeared on a daily basis, and I'm sure that there are convenient lies as to where they go and not, oh yeah, we just killed him yesterday.
Or, I mean, do you just accept that you're living in that world? It's hard to know because the nightmares make it so explicit. Because whenever they go into the night realm in the school, suddenly bodies are just being hung from the rafters and nooses. And, other people have bags over their head and they're on their knees and people come by and shoot them. Like, if you look at that world as the exposing of the subtext, I think it's saying that everyone really knew what was going on.
Yeah, but I think it plays better if we just assume that she's naive to all this. Like, I don't think she's dumb and doesn't realize what might happen. I think she's acting more emotionally as a teenage girl and not super concerned about the consequences.
Mm-hmm. And yet there is a tendency, I see it in J-horror sometimes, even though the female is usually a victim, like has a reason to be angry, the grudge. I was really mistreated, but then I become the monster. There was a part of me that was really like not liking the idea in this middle section that this is all her fault, right? That she's the real monster here and is now being psychologically tortured by monsters because, yeah, she just behaved in sort of an impulsive schoolgirl way. I'm happy to say the movie does eventually find its way to forgiving her. And I think it does so in a much needed direct language that, made it easier for me to accept what she had done.
Yeah, and I guess how you read her is how you read this entire movie, right? Because if you're not sympathetic to her in the least bit, then she's just going to be a monster the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And she is. I mean, again, that faceless girl with the stringy hair that's like, I think it's melting over her blank face or something like that. It's kind of a cliche to have the girl with the hair in her face in an Asian horror movie. But that's her, right? That's her as a monster because, and I haven't quite unpacked the symbolism of this, but because I don't know what about not having a face. Maybe she didn't, show empathy enough about what was going on or was just being stupid about what was going on. But yeah, she got a lot of people killed. And Arnie, I think I heard you say that she killed herself. Is that what happens?
Yeah, we see her on a chair with a noose around her neck a couple of times in this movie. In the game, she threw herself off the roof of the school, but in this movie, she hung herself.
Okay, you're helping me because there are so many times that imagery is playing out in an auditorium with people applauding. I assume that she was then executed as well. But her hanging herself was purely like a self-harming act. She was not forced to do that.
Right.
Okay. Didn't get that.
So she's already suffered from her guilt once in that she couldn't live with her own actions.
Got it. Okay, that does help. That actually does help to know that she felt that bad about it. Okay.
Now, did she feel bad about all the people in the book club, or did she only feel bad because she lost her lover? That's kind of up for debate.
She would have been okay with Yin. We can tell that if it had just been Yin getting on that bus, like, yay. This was the woman that was trying to keep me from my art teacher, and now he can draw me all the plants that he wants to.
And it should be said that Miss Yin and Mr. Chang weren't having a relationship. This was a Three's Company moment of a misunderstanding where Miss Yin and Mr. Chang are having the conversation where Yin is saying, you shouldn't be with this young girl because you're already in this book club and you could expose us all. And meanwhile, Fang is on the outside of that door and misinterpreting everything as Miss Yin and Mr. Chang also are lovers. And so she's jealous. But it's all one big misunderstanding. Oops.
Mm-hmm.
But it's scenes like this too that just mess with your head because it's like the way it's shot. She's standing in that doorway, full view of these people. So, like, is this a memory? Is this a replay? Is this her side of events? Because what you're describing, Arnie, is, she was out in the hallway and overheard this. But she's standing right there the whole time. So I never know what to make of some of the things that they're putting on screen as far as what we're supposed to take literally, what we're supposed to see figuratively, what we're supposed to see maybe as just a dream sequence. And that's all by design.
Yeah, I'll say this much. You're right. It's postmodern enough to know that we're not sure whose perspective is true, and we're seeing contradictory things sometimes. But I think anytime that they go into black and white, and they cut to that kind of stuff. Those flashbacks, I think we should take as literal truth. And then anything that's happening in this nighttime sort of subconscious world of the nightmare is, debatable. They are representations of people's fears about what really happened. And they seem to be an eternal loop. I think you mentioned that the game makes it more explicit that she's caught in this eternal replay. They rewind it a couple times, but even in the game, you're not allowed to get out of this once you know you're dead and what all that happened until what? How do you win?
There's two different endings, and it's based upon what choices you make. You meet spirits of yourself, and it asks you kind of existential questions. And if you give the wrong answer, you kind of lose the game, and she's just trapped to go through it again and again and again.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But if you give the correct answers, then she is released and you flash forward into the future where we find out we had lived. So it's a little bit more direct here because in this, not only does she have to accept it, but Chang shows up and gives her a mission. In order to atone for what you've done, somebody must live on. Somebody must remember this period of time for when democracy comes, when totalitarianism falls. And so Fang is given a mission to save Wei here, which is far more active a character than what we have in the game.
And again, this is the moment that I'm talking about that sort of helps me with her, is by Shang, who again is killed because of her. If he can turn to her and say, it's not your fault, really. And that's an important perspective. In the end, she didn't want anybody dead. She's living at a time where that's the consequence for not doing the right behavior. Blame the Kumatang. Don't blame the girl. So often in J-horror, it's Samara. It is the girl that in her rage for being violated is the monster. It really helps me to know that she becomes the hero in this climax, that she can fix this in some kind of psychodramatic way. I guess she is a ghost coming to Wei. He's in a jail cell. We've seen him a couple times being beaten and tortured and then thrown in a jail cell. And she comes to him as a ghost and cuts his bonds and gets him out of there?
Really, I think all she does is convinces him to confess. He doesn't actually escape. What he does is confess. And that's all they want, is if you confess to being a communist, we'll imprison you, but we won't execute you. Whereas all the other book club students denied, and were killed for it.
And wouldn't name names, I imagine, too. You know what? And that's a really beautiful thing, too, because I think so often, heroes are people that didn't rat, right? That held on and took the beating and just accepted it and are martyred. Our culture certainly reveres martyrdom. And so the fact that this movie is going to say that Wei does the right thing, in part because Fang urges him to do so, and just tell these torturers what they want to know so that you don't die, so that you can live. I thought that was profound. I thought that was powerful.
Yeah, I mean, that ends up being the ultimate message of this movie, right? That one life is worth all of it.
And that you don't have to die for a cause. That, okay, just give them the thing and live. The more important thing is to have a witness and a survivor that can tell the true history later. If everyone died for the cause, it really is no victory. And of course, we gotta have some monster shit too, right? You can't just have that be the ending. They do this whole thing that's where I got confused. Cause she comes to his jail cell, cuts his bonds, and then they're in that auditorium and there's a shadow monster with hands reaching out, grabbing him, pulling him away. She's gotta fight the lantern guy, and he's got the mirror face, so it's really her face, and kind of makes you think about the drippy-haired, faceless girl. Yeah, metaphorical battles with oneself as they're reaching these decisions and epiphanies. And she gets him to the fence. He's able to leave. Finally, someone can go. I don't know if the rains and the typhoons have stopped, but he gets over that fence and she accepts that she's going to be there. I think this is the end. Okay, you're going to haunt the school forever, but there is a part 3. The Ones Who Live is about setting her free too.
Yeah, this threw me for a big loop when it happened in the game. When all of a sudden we're flash forwarding and we're no longer in the White Terror, everything is done, and we as an old man, It
Yeah.
was really kind of a mind fuck.
Yeah, that this is his story as well. In fact, he is ultimately the one that gets the final word, so to speak. He remembers in that jail cell that Zhang told him, I have this book, The Symbol of Anguish, that I tucked away. It's got a message in it. I don't know why it's taken him so long. I can't tell whether it's, I literally just got released from prison and I can go do this, or is it, I just emotionally haven't been prepared to go back to Greenwood High School until I'm a very old man, but he's finally going to find that secret book and bring it to the ghost of Fang.
In the game, it's made very clear that he spent quite a long time in prison.
Okay.
And they took his youth away from him, and he was only released when the government was changed.
Right.
He was in jail that whole time in the game.
Which would be about 30 years. It should be said, again, the year 2000 is the year that Taiwan became a democracy. Up to that point, the Kuomintang were more or less, sometimes they were more oppressive than others, but they were more or less in control. And so I can imagine that from 1962 to 2000, yeah, this man was in jail, and that is where he's at as he's walking into the school, getting the book, and then it's got a message in it, and it's got that jade reindeer as well. Whatever that symbol is, I don't know. I feel like there are things I miss in this movie because I don't know their cultural significance. I don't know what reindeers mean. I think of Christmas. I'm sure that's not right. There's talk of narcissus flowers. I mean, I'm thinking, is that about like narcissistic people? I'm like, I don't have the reference points. This is where you can recognize your own cultural ignorance and go, okay, probably makes more sense if I was Taiwanese and had grown up with this stuff. But she's set free. I mean, I really take it to mean that she can now go be with Chang, that she has been haunting that school for 30 years as well. She has been in detention as much as he has been in detention, and now she gets to go be with her lover. And poor Wei is just going to be in friend zone forever. He's like, okay, I guess it's good that you finally get to be with my teacher. I get nothing. I just never got laid.
Poor Wei. Yeah, 30 years in the clink, and
Poor Wei.
still right up to the bitter end.
Yeah, it's rough. Brutal movie.
So Justin, Stuart, do you recommend Detention? Justin.
Hey, I think there's a lot to take in here. And, as Stuart has pointed out, there's probably quite a bit of cultural stuff that's going right past me and I'm not picking up on. But just from an outside view, this movie was enjoyable. I mean, it was gorgeous. The way that they mess with your mind from switching between color stock and slowly slipping into sepia tones. And next thing you know, we're in black and white flashbacks. Sometimes we're partially black and white and the focus is only the warm yellow light of the candle. That type of stuff will bring you in just by sitting there, I mean, visually, it's gorgeous. The special effects are, they're not over the top. They're not great. They're not terrible, but they work for what this is doing. But what really got me was the score. The score is just dead on perfect for this. The first 45 minutes of this movie really sets a tone that, I'm not sure where this ride is going. And to be honest with you, I didn't care. I wasn't sitting here going come on, pick up the pace, show me some monsters. Let's get some, kills in. And I'm glad that's not the type of movie it turned into. We've seen so many slashers, zombie, shoot 'em up movies in the arcade. And I'm kind of glad we ended on this more of an existential note. This is a nice step off of the platform. And it's a movie I would recommend, even outside of the arcade. I think it's a good enough movie just to check out. So yeah, it's a nice little recommend from me.
Stuart.
Yeah, detention is not punishment. I really thought it was going to be. I mean, so much in this series has gone that way, but I don't even know that it feels like a video game movie. I would never put it in the same retrospective as almost anything else we've talked about when we've talked about video game adaptations. And that was because I really came at this thinking horror and point and click mystery. And I mean, it is a mystery, but kind of a somber, postmodern political persecution one. The stories that it tells, it's imperfect. Some are more interesting than others. I think that we really get to know and care about Fang. I feel that Wei's story as a survivor, as the one that gets to live, is powerful. I'm not sure why we root for the communist pedophile. Like, that's a little weird, but at least he did have to wait 30 years to be with the schoolgirl. So I guess it all works out. You know, the one thing I would add, the one perspective I wish that they had done, because I feel like so much about this is about humanizing, but I wish I understood Bai. I wish I understood the inspector that was such a hard ass that's portrayed as the monster. You know, I feel like having him be a simplistic lantern monster, you could have gotten more shading out of this, but I'll stick in the positive. Yes, this could be a much more nuanced story, but it is so much better than I thought it would be, so much better than most of what we get here. I started the video game arcade with a recommend for King of Kong. It's so nice to be ending with a green arrow. So very happy about that. It's a history lesson that you may not be expecting, but is worth, I think, anyone taking the ride.
3 recommends for a video game movie. You know, it is a rare thing, especially when it's actually adapting the video game movie and not meta about the video game movie like King of Kong or Tetris.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I think I've been in detention too long because I'm the coolest on this movie of the 3 of us. I spent a lot of time playing the game and then watching the game and then watching this movie. And by the time I got to the movie and realized how direct an adaptation of the game it was, I don't think I was able to appreciate the movie as much as I would have had I only watched this as a movie and not tried to play the game first.
Right.
I found myself at times tedious with the way it was drawing out the story. And then I also think that I suffer from cultural shock here. I'm not able to relate at all. I'm learning about these periods of time in Taiwanese history. I don't know them at all. And so I can only empathize through facsimile instead of actually being moved by the stories of people who were killed for having an illegal book, which is just a horrifying thought to me. And I can't believe it was practiced, you know, so recently in history. So it's a gorgeous movie. It's a well-acted movie. I agree with everything Justin said about the visuals. Anytime I told myself, you know, I'm not really loving this movie, I had to step back and realize this is a really well-made movie, you know?
True.
And in the arcade, there are so many that just weren't even well made that this was a leg up. But as far as video game movies go, it's definitely one of the best out there. But as far as movies go, again, if you've played the game, I don't think you need this movie. And it's a recommend, but not a strong one.
Okay, so question for you, Arnie. If you could only do one, watch the movie or play the game, what are you better off doing?
Watch the movie, because I found the puzzles to be a little too simple, and I found the monsters to be not really prevalent in the game. It felt like playing a novel instead of playing a game, which is why I grew bored with playing it.
When I watched that walkthrough, I kind of got that feeling of, after I could side by side think about them, I'm like, I think this makes a better movie than it does a video game. And that's a very rare thing to say. But does it make a better TV series? I will just point you to the fact that Netflix has an 8-episode, and maybe it's going to have another season. I don't think so. But they did sort of a requel on this. You guys interested? I watched it.
So they rebooted and made a sequel?
Yeah, it's set in 1999, which is the last year that the Kuomintang was in power, and we have children of the characters here connecting. There's basically a transfer student who comes to the new Greenwood High. There's the old buildings that nobody's supposed to go into. She does. She gets possessed by the spirit of Fang, who tells her story again. We basically get a remake that tells this movie again, but at the same time, she's being possessed and doing things to get revenge on, like, Bai is still there at the school. Shang, I thought he got killed, but he's actually the principal. And the son of Wei, his nephew, is there also being friend zoned to hell because this transfer student girl has fallen in love with the poetry teacher. And there's a whole illicit schoolgirl mentor thing that goes on for too much, quite frankly. I will say this. The adaptation was so-so, but in the end, you're better off with the movie because 8 hours, 60-minute episodes, this thing really dragged. I'm like, I don't think there's enough here. I appreciated that they had more time to explore some of the other characters and storylines, but at 8 hours, I was ready to be done. I was trapped in detention and very much wanted to go home.
Yeah, this doesn't feel like a long form experience, and especially, you know, the characters I didn't feel like needed more exploration from the movie anyway, so.
Yeah. The movie might do a little bit of short shrift, but it's the best of what I can tell the bunch. If I had to play the game, watch the movie, or watch the TV show, movie's it. And this is it. Again, I want to reflect the fact that as of this moment, there are no video game movies to cover. That will change soon, but what do you guys think? Like, Arnie, you mentioned it. The best ones in this are the ones that aren't direct adaptations, right? King of Kong, Tetris, Wreck-It Ralph. Like, if you're just kind of riffing on video game culture or talking about the history of a game, you might have something. But if you're actually trying to dramatize 8-bit storylines, it usually goes pretty bad.
Yeah, I mean, I can't think of any examples throughout this entire experience of the arcade where we found a gem of a movie that just so happened to be based on a video game. Right? It just doesn't seem to work out that way. We had some big video game names that they feel like they tried to cash in on with a movie.
Mm-hmm. The ones that I recommended were Need for Speed, the Tomb Raider reboot, and a few of the Resident Evils. I think Resident Evil is still the strongest series within the arcade, but I mean, that is a derivative, largely inessential. Like, you don't have to see any of them. Because I said Green Arrow doesn't mean that you should watch any of them. I mean, honestly, when I think about it, the only one that you really need to see, we didn't cover. And that's because it's an HBO show, Last of Us. That's the only one that I would say really worth your time.
Yeah.
And looking back for me, Mortal Kombat is still going to be a high point for me, that first Mortal Kombat film. And I think, though, video game movies got better. You know, when we were dealing with the stuff from the 90s and even the 2000s, it was some really rough going. But I mean, if we look at some of the stuff that's come out recently, Detective Pikachu, that wasn't so bad. The Sonic movies.
I guess I did. Yeah, I'm less on those, but yeah, I did recommend Pikachu. I forgot about that one. I think I recommended a few of those, but I probably was on drugs.
It wasn't all nightmares, but my patchy memory, it always lands somewhere in that, like, Uva Bowl area where we were watching the fourth version of some video game adaptation.
Yes. So many zombie things.
The Blood Rain series was a particular low point.
Yeah.
Although Dolph Lundgren's In the Name of the King was also kind of terrible.
The fact that Uwe Boll was even in this, that he was in the mix, really just hurts the whole retrospective. He brought everything down.
I mean, I did my own form of banning in this video game retrospective. I am so anti-censorship to the core, and yet I burned movies. I tried to take it out of existence. And Justin, I want to give a shout out to you because, you know, you just kind of had started it Now Playing when we shoved you into video games. And now I feel like you've gone through the longest freshman hazing in history.
It's part of me now, man. This is part of my identity now. Thank you.
Yeah.
So next, we're giving you Transformers.
Hey, I graduated?
Yeah. Doesn't that feel like an improvement? Nothing video game-like about that at all. And we're not done. I mean, I've already intimated that they are making these movies. I know of a few that are coming this year. This August, in fact. Gran Turismo, I don't know if you guys know, a racing game. This is one of those quasi ones, so I'm a little more optimistic. It's a true story about a kid who was so good at the video game that he actually became a professional race car driver. And so it's a little bit of video game, but also another story. And it's directed by the guy that did District 9 and Elysium and Chappie. I think that one could be okay.
Yeah, because I was going to say, the game Gran Turismo is just pick your car and race around the track. I mean, I don't know how much story is to mine out of that, but...
Yeah. The mind shudders to think of how they might dramatize that. But they're not doing Fast and Furious. They're doing something a little bit, maybe with more heart. And then a game I don't really know, but I love this concept. Five Nights at Freddy's. It's going to be on Peacock in time for Halloween. It is apparently if Chuck E. Cheese became slasher heroes game. Like, this was a thing that I just totally missed, and I don't know how I did 10 years ago. It'll finally be a movie.
Yeah, it's big with the kids. It's actually kind of passé with some of the kids. You know, that's how far we are past it, but...
No. It's uncool now. If they had gotten it out 5 years ago, it would have been something.
Yeah, other people have beaten to the punch. There's been other movies that came out, and like that recent Winnie the Pooh movies in the same vein of like what they're trying to do here.
Yeah. How can we traumatize children by taking things they love and making them killers? Yes. But the big one, the one that could be the greatest of all, maybe, I understand it to be a great video game, and they've got not one, but two Oscar-winning actresses in it, Eli Roth's Borderlands. It's got Cate Blanchett and Jamie Lee Curtis, along with Kevin Hart, Jack Black, Gina Gershon, some kind of post-apocalyptic Mad Max kind of stuff. I can't tell what it is, but it has a scheduled release of sometime in 2023.
And they greenlit that sequel to that Mortal Kombat reboot, too. So that's coming.
Ooh. I mean, there are other stuff. Minecraft, because of the Super Mario Brothers movie, is happening. And I'm trying not to look too far into the future and just appreciate that we got 3 more, and maybe none of them will be terrible this year.
And speaking of not be terrible this year, this weekend, The Fast and Furious is back in theaters, and we will be reviewing Fast X next week. You know, the Fast and Furious series has been uneven from the get-go. It always feels like a engine that's going to have a false start, and then it does the quarter mile, and then it has another false start. So this one, we know the pit crew changed early on in the race. We lost director Justin Lin and brought in Louis Leterrier, but what will that mean for the franchise? And what the hell is Brie Larson doing in this movie? Do they not have enough characters? We're going to find that all out soon.
And meanwhile, with Memorial Day coming up, we're going to have some war movies, a pair of them. If you are a May patron, it's a good month to be one. We're going to have the dueling Oscar-nominated Vietnam War movies of the 80s. First, this Friday, Oliver Stone's Platoon, and then next Friday, Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket. It's a head-to-head. Which one's the better Vietnam film? Maybe they're both classics. We'll talk about it. I can say this, Platoon launched so many careers. You forget how many people were in that movie. Charlie Sheen, Johnny Depp, Tony Todd, Forrest Whitaker, Willem Dafoe, all of them like in their earliest roles.
So thank you for listening to Now Playing. Thank you for your support if you are a patron and can join us in the jungle for those 2 Vietnam films. Justin, Stuart, thank you for joining me. And until the next video game film, game over.
你把它留下，独自攀上树林。
Thank you for listening to this episode of Now Playing Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Come back to NowPlayingPodcast.com each week for another new movie review podcast. And in the NowPlayingPodcast.com archives, you can find reviews of other video game movies, including Resident Evil, The Wizard, and more. Also at our site, you can find hundreds of other movie reviews, including Star Wars, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Independence Day, the Avengers films, Back to the Future, Batman, Superman, The Fast and the Furious, and more. Do you want to continue? Insert money now to keep playing Now Playing. Now Playing Podcast is a show without any sponsors or ads. We rely on support from listeners like you to keep Now Playing operating. You can also join the Now Playing Patron campaign. Patrons of $10 or more get a new exclusive movie review every month, plus even more perks, including one where you can pick a movie for our hosts to review. Find the details on our website. You can follow Now Playing on Facebook and Twitter, where we post announcements of new episodes and where the hosts post movie mini reviews. Links to our social media pages are available on our homepage. Now Playing Podcast is produced by Arnie Carvalho. Associate produced by Jason Latham. Now Playing is edited by Heath and Arnie. Now Playing credits read by Brock. Venganza Media Incorporated is not affiliated with the motion pictures reviewed or otherwise referred to herein. All movie clips and music included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review and no infringement is intended. The opinions expressed on Now Playing are those of the individual hosts and may not reflect the opinion of Venganza Media Incorporated. Now Playing Podcast is an exclusive trademark of Venganza Media Incorporated. Now Playing is a Venganza Media production, copyright 2023, all rights reserved, and no part of this show may be reproduced, repurposed, or redistributed without the express written permission of Venganza Media Incorporated.
握在手中的自由如此近。